Welcome to the RSP Cast Going Deep. RSP Cast with Angelo Fantasy, Brandon Angelo. Of course, you can find him at Angelo_Fantasy on Twitter, at Matt Waldman on Twitter as well. Brandon, good to see you as always. We have a good show.
Absolutely, man. Excited, man. Trade deadline just happened, so we definitely have some stuff to talk about.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, so we've got that. We've got things, part of that is what direction are we looking at with the Vikings now? Then we look at the Titans and what they had happen this past Sunday with Will Levis, the Bills offense. We'll talk a little bit about them. Then I guess the current rage is to be polarizing about Brock Purdy. We'll have our viewpoints about that. Of course, the Bears, and the direction of running backs in this league, where that may be heading. And Demario Douglas, I think maybe a favorite of both of ours.
Absolutely, 100%.
So with that in mind, let's start with the Vikings. Kirk Cousins gets hurt. You had Jaron Hall out of BYU as a possibility, where a lot of people are like, yeah, it probably ain't going to happen. But, it may, at least for a week, I would have to think, as Josh Dobbs has to get ready. Josh Dobbs barely got moved in,
Right. Absolutely. It's an interesting, time to be a Vikings fan, because this injury to Kirk Cousins basically just spells the end of him as a Minnesota Viking, right? Yeah. But what it also does is it kind of gives you, with Josh Dobbs, the bridge to the next guy, right? So I think there's a pretty good chance if Josh Dobbs plays well, and he played well in Arizona, and from a nucleus standpoint, the Vikings are a much better team as a whole than the Arizona Cardinals are, right? Better weapons, better coaching. So I think there's a good chance Josh Dobbs is a starter day one next year. While they figure out, maybe they draft the quarterback in the first round, which I think they'll go that direction, whether via trade up or sit in this spot, and hopefully for them it's close to the pick 10. And then I think we see Josh Dobbs getting some run as a starter. I'd love to see him stick somewhere, right? I think we all would love that. I mean, he's played well, especially late last year with the Titans. I thought he actually did pretty well with the kind of the bad team he had of playmakers in front of him. And he played good ball with the Cardinals, right? Eight touchdowns, 5 picks, 81 passer rating. Like, wasn't bad whatsoever. But I think it's an interesting time to be a Vikings fan too, because the Justin Jefferson decision kind of looms, right? And I think with Justin, when he looks at, not just the money part of it, is, hey, like he wants to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I think he's on his way to doing so. You need a quarterback to get you the ball. So does he trust that brass to go out and make a good decision, either acquire a veteran that can help Justin grow some more, or does he trust Josh Dobbs enough to be that bridge guy to, kind of the heir apparent?
Well, who's a veteran that we would have in mind for Minnesota next year? If it's, if they're going to bring him in and then have Josh Dobbs as the second and Jaron Hall as maybe the third, or a competition between Hall and Dobbs.
Absolutely. That's the fun part, is there really isn't a ton of veteran quarterbacks right now that you would kind of say fit that bill, right? A non-veteran in division is an interesting one, and it's going to be pretty simple. It's Justin Fields, right? I think that's one I don't think they'll ever go that direction, but it's fun to think about, right? I think that's a young quarterback that might have a change of scenery next year. If they draft Caleb Williams, then they're definitely going to move on from Justin Fields, and they'll find a trade suitor for him. And the Vikings are definitely a suitor. But I'll be interested to see what they do with that, because they need a quarterback to get him the ball, right? I mean, it's him and TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison. Those are 3 really good playmakers, but they need someone to distribute to them. So we'll see who that is.
Yeah, that's without a doubt. And when you look at the rest of the names, Jameis Winston was a name for the trade market, and they didn't pull that trigger.
Right.
The most ironic one that would be here, and it would obviously be the signal that they would be drafting someone, but then felt like they could use him, is Teddy Bridgewater.
I knew you were going to say yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure.
I would.
No,
I
100%.
think as a fan, it would be fun to see Teddy return and have
Yeah.
like a big year and like
Yeah.
hold off the rookie and then like But I
Have
know
a
that
Geno Smith. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure. That'd be
Gino,
great.
Jared, kind of all that tied into
Yeah.
one. But really, yeah, they've got to be looking at they've got to make a good pick at quarterback, or they're going to have to trade for somebody. But that's like trading for quarterback seems like rife with
Mhm.
all sorts of craziness from a salary cap perspective and how
Absolutely.
much you're giving up.
Oh yeah.
So, and this team isn't a complete team by any stretch of the
No.
imagination. I mean, Brian Flores is in there to be aggressive because they don't have a lot in that secondary. And then,
Right.
so looking at this, and it's such a shame because Kirk Cousins is just good enough that you can look at like Jordan Addison and you know and Jefferson together, and you're thinking, "Wow, what a receiving core this is!" Because
Exactly.
I mean, I said this the other day, but it feels like you know. I mean, I'm sure we both like Jordan Addison. I thought Jordan Addison had a lot of T.Y. Hilton in him, kind of a guy
Yeah.
who could play outside and take the ball away from you in a contested situation if needed, even though that may not be like the ideal thing to ask him to do. But it was almost like when Jefferson got hurt, they're like, "Well, we're going to take the training wheels off of you," and he was
Right.
like, "It's you should have done it in May." I mean, almost the way he was playing it, it was almost like,
Right.
why baby me?
Right.
You shouldn't have done that. You could have taken me out of Pittsburgh, and I would have been doing this.
Right.
We didn't even need
100%.
me at USC. So it's just a shame because now I'm looking at this and going, they need an instant guy to
Right.
take advantage of these two
Right.
players, and I just don't know if the timing's gonna be there for that.
Yeah. I mean, really, yeah. I mean, I think Justin Jefferson's gonna ask that same question because he can get the money anywhere, right? I mean, every place that he goes knows he's a top three, top two receiver in the NFL, right? Especially
Yeah,
with the age, he's probably the one of the best players under 25 years old. So I think in that respect, like you're looking at honestly, if I'm him and a team like let's say the Kansas City Chiefs or a bigger market team wants to give you some good money to go there, you might take it because it might take the Vikings a while to figure this out, right? I mean, if Josh Dobbs comes in and even if he does a good job, like we all know, Josh Dobbs is not the long term answer in Minnesota. But if you get a rookie quarterback in there who's going to be a little bit green, I mean, who knows, right? I mean, that might be a frustrating time. We've seen even veterans, with Jimmy Garoppolo going to Las Vegas, the type of rifts that's causing for Devontae Adams, who's still a top five, top 10 receiver. Absolutely. We see what that's causing him to do. But I mean, man, it can be really tough if you're a superstar playmaker and you can't have someone distributing the ball. So, I mean, I think
yeah,
it's going to be really interesting to see what they do, how many games they win the rest of the season, how they play their hand in the draft.
yeah. It's gonna have to. It's gonna be tough because I would, if I were the Kansas City Chiefs right now, after I'm looking at my team, and if someone was able to get into that room and say, "Okay, fellas, let's be honest with ourselves. Look, Coach Reed, you're one of the greats in the game. Your offense is a great offense, but let's look at all the players that you've cycled through at wide receiver since you arrived in 1999 at Philly, and there aren't many that you drafted who actually were legit like top options. And the reason that
Yeah.
is in your offense, you need guys who can improvise, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. We
So
talked about that 2 weeks ago.
yeah. So Justin Jefferson would be the perfect example of like, all right,
Absolutely.
I can succeed Travis Kelsey and supplement for him maybe if in his final
Yeah.
year or two as he slows down if he wants to continue to play. If
Yeah.
he's not if he slows down at all during that period that he's there.
Yeah.
Jordan Addison, you kind of feel bad because it's like here you are,
Yeah. I mean,
but
the ascension kind of, you might have to put a halt to it in some respects, right? I mean, I think that's the big deal is you have a player like him who's, getting better each week, right? He's becoming, a potential number one option in the NFL, right? He's getting to a point where he's one of those. I would say he's potentially a top 5 number 2 receiver in the league, right? I think behind some of the bigger names like obviously a Waddle, a Higgins, a Smith. After that, it's a bunch of question marks with Mike Williams going down too, right? So it's like you have one of the best young secondary options in the league. Could be a primary option for a lot of teams. So,
It's
like I said, man, it'll be really interesting to see what they do in the draft and if Justin Jefferson wants to stick around. Because you brought up a really good point, and we talked about it 2 weeks ago. You know, that Chiefs offense needs an improviser,
yeah,
right? Travis Kelce's aging. He's not getting any younger. In 2 years, he might not be in the league, or, he's on his last legs, right? The Kansas City Chiefs don't have one of those in their offense right now. They got a nice power slot in Rashee Rice. I think he's good. But after that, who do you have? And
yeah,
also, if we look at that offense, they just lost the Denver Broncos. They don't look like they've looked in years past. Whether it's because Matt Nagy's the one calling plays, or the league has sort of figured out the Mahomes stuff, or they just don't have a primary option on the outside,
yeah,
right? I mean, going through a year of that is one thing, but going through multiple years of not having that guy, it's gonna be tough to win in the AFC, and it's gonna be tough to win another Super Bowl if you have that. So they
yeah.
need a guy like that, and if Justin Jefferson is staring them in the face, I mean, you're Andy Reid, you gotta be licking your chops and saying, "Hey, we just gotta do what we gotta do to get him," because that puts
Yeah.
you over the top, right?
I don't know, just as an evaluator, and I know that, people will say, well, we've already established that these guys aren't good enough because if they were good enough, they would have already popped right now. But if to buck that trend, because we know that that's not always the case, if I were the Vikings right now, I'd be like, okay, I've got Jaron Hall. Maybe I should do a casting call of some guys that I want to target maybe in free agency to just see what's there, like Matt Corral, like
Sure.
like Skylar Thompson. Is there could we possibly maybe give a 6th or 7th round pick for him, and bring him in and
Right.
see what he might have, and that way, if we don't get the guy we wanted, we have some guys in camp that may actually turn out to be pretty good. I would I look at this team and I think that all in all, it would probably be in their best. And I mean, they've just got to nail the pick. But I think also Trey Lance. What is Dallas stuck to holding on? And are they like, we're holding on to him for a reason?
Sure.
Probably, but could they be paid possibly to maybe give up on him before he even gets started and see if you want to roll that? I would have to think Minnesota scouts have seen enough of Trey Lance since he was, a couple states over, to see, maybe they would have, that would be a good fit in some regards. So there are some options that might be lower cost if they don't get who they want in the draft. But it's a rich draft class, at least in names. We'll see. Michael Penix could be a really. I mean, if you're gonna name a guy that you go, can we have an offense that feels a little bit like Dante Culpepper with Chris Carter and Randy Moss?
Mm-hmm.
Penix has that bombs away attitude and accuracy that could be fantastic for that
100%.
team. So
100%.
yeah, so there's some options there. Now, bombs away, we certainly saw that with Will Levis, against Atlanta. Now, my thought, Brandon, was I saw a lot of single high by Atlanta. I saw a lot of blitzing, and usually it seems like it goes two ways with rookie quarterbacks. It's either we're gonna play really kind of conservative and just like make you kind of dink and dunk and pick us apart and show us that you can be patient and do that, or we're going to try and rattle your chain and be super aggressive and see if you can handle that. And it looked like Atlanta went that direction and failed miserably with Levis to his credit. I mean, 4 touchdowns and he was accurate on most of his vertical shots.
Yeah, he lit him up, and I think everybody was kind of surprised, right? Because the Titans' offense, even with Ryan Tannehill, like the past 2 years, just hasn't looked good. Yeah. They don't have the playmakers. DeAndre Hopkins getting old. Traylon Burks doesn't look good. Chika Conquo's, okay. Like, your offense runs through Derrick Henry, and that's how it's been. But, man, like, I'll be honest, like, this offense looked completely different with Will Levis at the helm. More so from hey, we're not going to be afraid to really call some of the level 3 concepts that we have.
Yeah.
Because Tim Kelly, that's something the whole year that they haven't done. And last year as well, they didn't do that too. So really we're seeing a different iteration of this offense that I think could be a ton of fun. I think if you actually get another playmaker in there, right, that can let Traylon Burks play the power slot role, right? Because that's, I think, where he's going to be best in the NFL, and I think he's best right now. He's not an outside receiver, not ready for that type of role yet. Let DeAndre Hopkins play the X. You have your Z as, a guy who can play all 3 levels of the field, and then you have a good running back in Tajay Spears. Like, that's a good offense right there, right? So I think, in my opinion, this is an offense that is going to take steps forward from now on, because I think they've figured out, okay, this is how we have to play football. And Vrabel, I think, is kind of gritting his teeth, saying, we have to take this step, because Mike Vrabel, I love Mike Vrabel, but my God, is he so stubborn. He plays football like it's 2011.
Yeah.
And that's how he loves it. He is.
I thought he played like it was like 1911.
Yeah, I think I'm being a little bit too generous.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it really reminds me of, when Adrian Peterson was on the Vikings. All right, let's give AP the ball 30 times a game. Whatever happens. Get us in good field position. Play the clock. Yeah. Make sure we're in favorable down and distance, and that's it.
Yeah, and let your quarterback try and win it in the next 2 minutes. Dan Reeves offense.
Exactly. And so now he actually has someone who can push the ball down the field a bit. And I think we're seeing the tip of that. I think it's awesome. We'll see how he plays once. And we'll talk about Brock Purdy, and people are saying, oh, Brock Purdy, he's not going to be very good anymore. The NFL figures you out eventually, right? These guys get paid too much and they're too smart, and that's their job, right? If I had 24 hours a day and my job was to stop opposing quarterbacks, and I get paid $500,000 to do it, you bet I'm going to try to stop opposing quarterbacks, right? Because these guys, defensive coordinators, want to stick in the league. And that's something that I don't think people take into account, is the reason a lot of rookie quarterbacks have success. We have a lot of defensive coordinators have no idea where they're going to be, right? And they're starting from scratch. But as you look at schematically how they're playing, how they play different defensive sets, what their tendencies are on down and distances, then it gets interesting to see, is there a counter punch to the punch, right? And I think that's when we'll see what Will Levis is. I think right now he's going to be really good for the first 3 weeks of this, at least. Yeah. But I think after that's when we see, can he make adjustments on the adjustment? And that'll be interesting to see, because a lot of young quarterbacks can't do that. And they kind of get stuck in a phase where, oh man, like, what's this is going to be like this rest of my career? And Brock Purdy's there right now where he's got to make an adjustment to the adjustment, or else he's going to kind of fall flat in San Fran. So that's an interesting one for me. But where do you see Purdy rest of season? What do you think Shanahan's going to do to, in that offense, the Shanahan offense? What do you think it's going to look like now?
Well, I'll certainly talk to that, but I want to go back to Levis real quick, just because, when you look at Levis, and I love what you brought up there, because that's one of the things I write about a lot, is that from talking to people, it seems like my theory of, evaluating quarterbacking at the NFL level is games, not weeks, how many weeks they've started, but whenever they become starters for their team, whether it's year 1, year 2, or even year 3. Starts 1 through 6, essentially, maybe a little earlier than that. Usually that's when defenses are too aggressive or too kind of passive and get picked apart, or just blown away like what we saw
Right.
last week. And so because they just don't know what they had, like you said, they're starting from scratch. Then week 6 through about 14 or 15 to me is that's when, as
Yep.
you described, they're putting the scouts and have accumulated enough data for the defensive coordinators to go, let's try this. We're not going to throw everything in there because if we do, we might get blown up again. So we don't know for sure. We've only seen limited samples, so we're going to try this and maybe these two things. And then the next week's defense says, well, that worked against the Vikings. The Vikings did this successfully. We can do that because we have the personnel. We play a similar scheme. We can do this and add this. And then, after about 5 or 6, 7 weeks of this book starts to get thick enough that teams kind of know what these guys can or can't do based on what they did in college. Because if they're successful right now, if they have early success, to me that's really saying, okay, I look like I did in my scouting report, good and bad, and I'm looking like that against the speed and complexity of the game that we're seeing thus far. Now we're going to add more complexity to the game and more disguises, and can you how are you doing? And some of the things that quarterbacks do, they'll be like, yeah, I can handle that, and some are like, yeah, I can handle. Oops, no, I can't. And then I think around that week 13 to 17, or of their starts 13 to 17, that's usually when they start to hit the trough. Like Brock Purdy right now, if you look at Brock Purdy, he's literally, whether it's the playoffs or not playoffs included, he's somewhere between start 14 and start 17, depending on which angle you look at it. Well, that's when teams are like, we know what to do. We're going to put you in a corner. We're going to make you throw out of it and see how you handle it. And then it's basically up through that, from that point through start 30 is, can you improve? Can you be better than your scouting report?
100%, right? Can you fight through that? Can you fight through that adversity and really start to elevate your own play? Because if you look at starting at the Cleveland game, right? Debo goes out, no McCaffrey, right? You're losing playmakers left and right, and just a lot of pressure in his face, and it looks different with Debo out, right? Those 1 to 2 yard passes aren't going to be 13, 15 yards, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is an interesting time for Purdy to really kind of show us, can he step up and be the guy long term in San Fran? Because I think he can be. It's just making sure that he's comfortable and is getting the ball in his playmakers' hands. I think Brandon Ayuk is gonna be the one to step up. I think he's looked fantastic. I can't say enough about how much he's grown since Shanahan literally wouldn't put him on the field. He refused to play him because he didn't like his attitude or whatnot. But I mean, he's going to be someone I think that steps up even more and plays a bigger role in the later part of the year.
So I'm going to get to Purdy right here in a minute here. But what I'll say with Levis, just to wrap it with this, is that with all that in mind, watching Levis and seeing how Atlanta played him, I would say this from his scouting report. Levis was one of those players who couldn't get all his cleats into the ground all the time on certain throws, or when his cleats were in the ground, they were pointed in directions that really didn't allow him to be pinpoint accurate. And if you notice in that game, there were some good plays made, but they were often throws either behind or off target. He had a miss to Okonkwo that he should have let him, and it would have been he was wide open and completely missed that. And it was because he was kind of hot, pressure was coming, and he didn't get all his cleats in the ground, and the ball he had a wobbler that didn't have much on it. He couldn't drive it. And then there was one where his feet were not where they needed to be, and he's still clicking his feet as he finishes his release. The midpoint of his back foot and that front toe aren't pointed where they always need to where they be, and then they click into place as he's trying to throw it, and that doesn't work. The ball's just slightly behind usually. And that happened with a touchdown pass to Hopkins, who caught the crossing route behind him and then continued. So I think when we start seeing defenses say, you know what, we're gonna take away the deep game, and we're gonna make you fit it in the tight windows in the middle of the field, like your scouting report at Kentucky said was problematic. And I have a feeling that if Will Levis hasn't improved his accuracy, this is where his game will fall apart. But like you said, I think it's going to take a few games. Now, as for Purdy, listen, I thought Sunday's game was the best display of quarterbacking I've watched of two quarterbacks in terms of like anticipation and tight window accuracy one of the best I've seen this year. And that includes what Purdy did. He made some awesome throws in that game. The problem is that the windows keep getting tighter and tighter. And I'm not talking by tighter and tighter like by the standard that he's going to have to continue to play up to that, which he will because that's what's happening. But I'm talking by a standard that Justin Herbert would have difficulty making those throws. Matt Stafford would probably throw a few interceptions because he would try to drill them in there anyway.
100%.
You know, so Purdy, you know, you look at that, and we did see that Kittle actually came alive this last week.
Yeah.
So we saw that access. And when I looked at the mistakes he made, like last week, you know, the Kittle slipped on a shovel pass in the red zone. There was no real receiver because that was a scheme play. He had to improvise to McCaffrey, and Pratt made a great play. Now, should he have thrown the ball? No. And maybe he should have seen Pratt coming, you know, from his backside, you know, sight line. But it was a better play by the linebacker than a play endemic of Brock Purdy, you know, Jimmy Garoppoloing.
Right.
You know, sure. And then the next play, people will look at that, and because they were back-to-back, they would say, oh, see, he's like Jimmy Garoppolo. He just falls apart after he makes one mistake. And I'm thinking, if he did that, he would have been out as a rookie, you know?
Sure.
And we got to remember, Logan Wilson, who had his 10th interception on that next play, baited Purdy into thinking that he was moved or held in place and then cut off that ball. His 10th interception in 3 years. I looked up on Pro Football Reference how many linebackers are active leaders in interceptions right now, and there are guys like Levante David with 12. I'm trying to think of other Mosley and about four other guys have 13. And all those guys I just mentioned who have 2 or 3 more than Logan Wilson have played 2 to 3 times as long in the league as Logan Wilson has. So you're talking about one of the best coverage linebackers in football right now. So, you know, again, Purdy shouldn't have thrown it. I'll say that. But then he comes back after that and leads them on a 75-play drive, makes George Kittle drops a pass that was like an easy play that would have been a first down inside the green zone. And then he has to follow it up with a redonkulous, you know, throw across his body that everyone would scream, no, don't do that. But it was wide open, and he made it. He made it happen. And I've seen him do that at Iowa State on occasion. And I remember remarking in his Wisconsin report, there are plays like this that you're like, I see why he sees it and wants to throw it. I just don't know whether he has the arm to do it in the NFL. But lo and behold, he's kind of calibrating to figure that out. So I'm a believer now. I wasn't sure heading into the season, but I'm a believer now to the idea that you don't make the throws he did. And there was a beautiful pocket play where he gets...
Oh, and he slid? Yeah.
When the safety came on, the safety off the left side, if you didn't watch it, the safety disguises the blitz perfectly, comes through unblocked, and Purdy literally sidesteps it with his feet under him, and then slides up and then makes a perfect throw.
Yeah,
you know, and I'm like, those aren't plays that most quarterbacks make well.
No.
So the combination of the pocket presence and management, the anticipation, the placement in the windows that he's throwing it, combined with when things screw up and he makes 2 big mistakes in a row that cost them the game. Okay, I mean, at that point, he was the reason. He still came back and led them to a score.
Absolutely.
I mean, like I'm a believer that this is a trough right now, but he's going to play his way out of it.
Oh, I 100% agree. I think. I also think too that he has the locker room too. Like that's the thing is, there's no more Trey Lance like over the shoulder, right? Like,
and
if
please
he makes
stop about Sam Darnold. Come on.
No. He's never gonna happen. But no, he has a lot of leeway. I mean, and they know this is a kid that like, he's Mr. right? I mean, like he's gonna be someone that fights in battles and scratches and claws his way, to everything he gets, and that's super important when we're talking about the quarterback position in this league because so many guys just kind of have it good and then they just kind of just just go away, right? Like Jimmy Garoppolo is one of those. Like, how many teams are gonna give Jimmy Garoppolo another starting job? Not many, right? He's blown it again. So, I mean, really, a guy like Purdy is in a good situation to continue to improve, and I'm really excited to see him do so too. Because I mean, I think this is, besides the Eagles, I think it's the Eagles. I think it's three teams: the Niners, the Eagles, and I think the Lions as well.
Yeah.
I think those three teams are really good, very well coached. And the Lions are whenever I watch the Lions play, like I did against Vegas on Monday night, they just surprised me. Like they just play good ball. They were missing 3 interior linemen, and they absolutely dominated the line of scrimmage.
Yeah,
you wouldn't even know. And that's a super cool thing. That's a lot of coaching and it's a lot of Dan Campbell, and his staff. But that's going to be a team to watch. As we get closer and closer to the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it a little bit last night, and that is in the sense that, Felix Sharp and I were talking about last night, and Felix is a huge Lions fan. And he was like, the thing that impressed me about it is that the Lions have built a team that can win outdoors. And that was their goal. And they're going to run it down your throat if they need to. And in the playoffs, I mean, people don't explain this well enough. I always laugh because everybody goes, well, in the playoffs, you need to run the ball. And that's all they say on national TV. They don't explain why. They don't explain that teams are banged up and hurt because they've been playing injured all year.
100%.
And they can't hold up physically. So if you can run the ball, you have an advantage that way.
Absolutely.
The elements, is part of
it.
You
play in Philadelphia.
Quarterbacks are arm weak. Every quarterback, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2, and they'll probably be in the playoffs, but still, are arm weary and can't throw the ball with the zip that they were able to throw it with at the beginning of the season due to the number of reps that they've had. It's natural. So yes, running the ball is an extension of that. And yeah, I'm with you on the Lions. That was they're poised, and I love Dan Campbell. I mean,
he's awesome.
Yeah,
he's awesome. I loved him on Hard Knocks. I think that was the first time we really got a taste of what he's actually like. And he's super. The thing I love about Dan Campbell, he's so authentic.
Yep.
Right? He is who he is, and if you love him, you love him. You hate him, you hate him.
Yep.
And his players buy into it, and his players are an extension of who he is. That's super important for head coaches, right?
Yeah.
I think he has that personality that kind of radiates towards his players, and you can kind of feel that. And we saw on national television that like those dudes play.
Yeah.
Like those dudes play hard, and they're probably gonna have. I mean, really, when you talk about the run game and how important it is in the playoffs, they have a top 3 run game in the league.
Yeah.
Like Montgomery and Gibbs are as good as a 1-2 punch as you'll find in the NFL right now.
Oh, no doubt.
And I think it's a really good balance of if you're playing in the elements and outdoors, if you're playing in Philly, Dave Montgomery is that. Hey, if it's snowing and cold weather, that's your guy, right?
Yeah.
But if you got to keep pace with teams, great. You have your Ferrari and Jahmyr Gibbs, right? And that's a big deal. Even we saw too. I think the important thing was, hey, if Montgomery goes down, like, can we trust this Gibbs kid to have 25 plus touches? Yeah. I mean, he looked every bit of the 12th overall pick in that Vegas game. Every bit.
Yep.
And he did a lot of the things in that game that we wanted to see him start to do as the game slows down for him, especially running in between the tackles. And it wasn't like he wasn't a bad in between the tackles runner, just didn't have the experience there. And Austin Eckler alluded to, he's very green in that area. Just didn't experience it a lot at Alabama, right? Didn't experience that a lot at Georgia Tech, right? He was so good outside the tackles that's where they gave him touches, right? And as a receiver. But what we saw is he was playing running back in a traditional sense, right? But they still use some of those outside zone delays. I think those were really cool. That's a really cool concept. And then they're using the traditional inside zone with him, and he looked good doing all of it. He made the touchdown play was one of the highest level plays I've seen from a rookie running back, where he made the cut, but he made it in between two blockers. Perfect timing, and then the natural ability to, just foot race to the end zone. But with guys like that, where it's, your top 20 pick, top 15 pick, top 12 pick, you want to see them, because you see it in college. Like there's moments in college when, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, like you're like, oh, this is the best guy in the field. This is the best athlete on the field. You wait for the kind of the NFL moment where you're like, hey, that's the baddest dude on the field today. And that's what we kind of saw, right? We saw he was the best athlete on the field, and he just kind of moves at a different speed than everybody else does, right? Yeah. And that's a really cool thing to see. He's an athlete amongst other 1%, 1%ers, right? It's like a billionaire against millionaires. Both are rich. The billionaires are a little richer.
Absolutely great analogy.
And that's what we kind of saw, and it was really cool to watch because, my gosh, if he plays like that, the Lions going to be really freaking hard to beat because they give you a threat on every single. It's like what we wanted Jameson Williams to be at receiver, right? Yeah. We wanted Jameson Williams to be this huge threat. Jameson Williams just basically they just said, all right, Davin Peoples-Jones, come on, we need you in the building here because we don't trust Jameson Williams, right? But Jahmyr Gibbs is, when he's on the field, all 11 know where he's at, right? And that's super important thing, especially that opens up things for, St. Brown and Laporta and the rest of that passing game, and it makes Jared Goff's job a lot easier, right? Because they're worried about the running back. That's rare.
Yeah.
Well, there's not a lot of teams that they're worried about the running back. And I think that's what he gives the Lions, and that's a super, super important thing that not a lot of teams can say, especially as you get into January and February, is you have to worry about Laporta, you have to worry about St. Brown, you have to worry about Montgomery, and you have to worry about Jahmyr Gibbs.
And I think that of all the teams out there, everybody wants to have like a deep threat, a vertical threat that can win on one play. But if there's an offense that I look at and say, well, it'd be nice if they had it, but who gives a shit? It would be the Detroit Lions because really Laporta is a good Laporta or St. Brown or Josh Reynolds or now Donovan Peoples-Jones. They're the type of players that can win deep off of long developing vertical routes,
big
deep
long
crossers,
play action,
long play action. So that's fine. All of them are good after the catch. If we all remember, Donovan Peoples-Jones was one of the best punt returners in the NCAA, and a fantastic runner after the catch that we haven't seen that be exploited. Laporta's good after the catch. I mean, all of them are. So really, this team, and Jared Goff is a guy that we've seen has proven that he'll just piece drives together. He'll,
absolutely. So, it felt like they had the ball the first drive. It felt like they had the ball for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like and it's one of those things where you're right. They don't have to have a true level 3 threat because Dan Campbell doesn't want to win that way.
Right.
It's kind of like how Vrabel doesn't want to win that way in a sense too.
Yeah.
And these are two smash mouth, hard nosed football players, right? Just don't take shit from anybody. You want to win that way too.
Yeah.
And the difference is Dan Campbell's team can actually play football like that and do it in a winning way.
And he's got enough. Yeah. And he got enough. He hit on his players. Yeah. He hit on his players.
They nailed this draft class. They absolutely nailed it. Laporta, Gibbs, Laporta, Branch, Campbell.
Yeah.
Those are all if you go through a draft class and you come out with 4 starting caliber players, that's a massive win.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And looking back on it, I don't want to sit and bash anybody who thought that Dan Campbell's welcome to the Lions speech and introductory speech to the media. People made fun of him for talking about biting ankles and all that stuff.
Yeah, the biting kneecaps. Yeah.
And I was like, it was funny because I was sitting with my buddy Eric Stoner, talking to him when we heard that, and we called each other up and we were like, "What do you think of that?" And I was like, "I love it. I know that there are people that don't, and we're making fun of it, but I thought he was genuine, and that's the thing. You
Super
have to,
authentic, man.
yeah, and I think people needed time to understand. Not everyone's going to be able to look at someone and say that's authentic, but I think that when you watch enough people over time, you kind of get the sense of who's for real, and he certainly was
Yeah,
always for real
you get
from the
the
get
idea
go.
of who's real and who's not,
Yeah.
and I think he's one that will. That's just who he is, right? And you got to either love him or hate him, but hey,
Yeah.
they're buying into it, and
So
that's important.
so do you think there's fantasy value for Donovan Peoples-Jones this year, or do you think that's more of just a nice piece where, I mean, like, what do you recommend to somebody who's a fantasy GM right now and they go, oh, they got Donovan Peoples-Jones?
Yeah, I think it just I think he's a nice I think he's the nice tertiary piece that they've been kind of missing, right? And I think he's played enough ball now where I think he's a good vet, right? He's a younger guy, but I think he plays like a good vet. But he offers you enough athletically to where there's upside there, right? There's upside, but there's also a safety net, right? With Jameson Williams, I mean, I think he has as many career drops as receptions. Not even kidding.
Yeah.
And it's going to take Jameson Williams a couple more years to potentially even figure it out to a point where he's startable. Like you can put him on the field for more than 50% of snaps. You can't do that right now.
Yeah.
And if you're in fantasy leagues, I'm not getting too excited about Donovan Peoples-Jones, but I will say this. If there's times where Laporta or St. Brown, one of them's not healthy, I think there's a secondary role there for a guy like DPJ. Because I think he can play a role, and I think he can be. We kind of look at how Josh Reynolds, right? Like look what he did when St. Brown was out. He played really well, right? He commanded targets and he didn't make a ton of mistakes. And I think that's what DPJ can be, and then some, right? He has a lot more upside than a Josh Reynolds, but just as much safety, and two, he offers you value as a punt returner. So I think that's a great trade for them. I think that's a big playoff move as you get him more comfortable.
What's the upside to him as opposed to more of Josh Reynolds? Because that's the thing that I wanted to know is like, I
Yeah,
saw him as more of like, okay, as it looks like they're looking at him as like, I didn't think of him 1-to-1 with Williams as much as I saw him as 1-to-1 with Reynolds, but
yeah,
and going, well, does that mean they're like, we're ready to pass on Reynolds, or we're looking at it and saying Reynolds can be there as the bridge for
hmm
Donovan Peoples-Jones
yeah.
once that's over. So what do you see with Donovan Peoples-Jones where you say, yeah, he's got more upside than Reynolds other than youth?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just the overarching athleticism, right? Josh Reynolds is not a super athletic guy, and to
Yeah.
win on the outside, especially against teams like San Francisco, teams like Philadelphia, right? You have to have the ability to be a vertical threat and go downfield. And one thing I think that people don't really understand about DPJ is he tested as probably one of the most athletic receivers, height weight wise, in the past 6 years. And I think we haven't seen that a ton. He does return punts, which is pretty cool for a guy his size. But I think like you alluded to earlier, we haven't really seen that part of him yet. We haven't seen the post catch stuff, right? I think that is going to be where he can grow into a legit, like, hey, number two, number three option in the NFL offense, and do so in Detroit. Too much volatility in Cleveland, obviously, for many reasons. And I think this is going to be a place where he can potentially, either split time with Josh Reynolds or take that role from him outright as the postseason comes. So I think you're going to want a bigger threat on the field when you're playing teams like Philadelphia, right? Like, do Philly's outside corners, will they respect Josh Reynolds? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
But you want to give them something to think about. And I think DPJ does that.
That makes sense. Yeah, because Reynolds is more of what Nico Collins is doing right now with a lot of defenses where,
Sure.
and Collins can do more than that, but you see him taking advantage of outside shade coverage, and that's where he's getting a lot of his big plays right now, even though he
Right.
can do more. And I think that's where Reynolds does well. And I'll just add this, since I'm contractually obligated, that I didn't mention that the Minnesota Vikings probably should look north to the CFL and say, hey, Chad Kelly, maybe we could pay you a little less and you can have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison
Right.
and T.J. Hawkinson, and
Right.
we may not pay you as much as what we'd pay another guy, but
Right.
you'd have a shot, and if you do well, yeah, we'll break the bank for you. So that's
We
another
need
one I'd
every
suggest.
podcast. We need some Chad Kelly reference before. But here goes this. He's better than a lot of backups in the league, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
I totally agree with you.
I'm I'm a shill for Chad Kelly at this point just because my evaluation was so strong. Okay, so Tyson Bagent, you're a Bears fan. What'd you think?
I am a Bears fan. Here goes this. I like Bagent a good bit. I don't think he's the guy like
No.
and anywhere probably. But I'll tell you this. He plays well within structure, can make plays out of structure. He's someone that is going to be a good NFL backup for probably a long time. Reminds me a lot of Gardner Minshew. Like that's who I kind of see when watching him.
I get that.
Like he can,
He's got a better arm than Gardner, though.
he does, 100%. But like he's athletic enough to run around and make plays with his feet outside the pocket, and he has a good natural feel for the game. You can kind of tell that like the clock's not ticking too quickly. But he's a good backup quarterback, right? I think he's gonna be one of those guys like a Minshew, like a Josh Dobbs, right? Like Josh McCown, like one of those guys who just sticks around for a long time because they're good in relief, right? If you need them to come in and if the starter gets hurt, you know what you're going to get. And I think he can kind of ascend into that. Like the people like, oh my gosh, this is someone who might take Justin Fields' job. Stop. Like no chance, right?
No.
Either this is Justin Fields' job or someone who's not in the roster.
Yeah.
But I liked watching him play, man. I think it's kind of fun to see what these guys will be because you have no idea, especially a guy like him coming from a super small school. Like you have no idea what these guys are going to be in the NFL. But we kind of saw, hey, this is someone that could be valuable as a backup option for a long time, and I'd love for him to be in Chicago for a while. That'd be cool. I mean, I think having a guy like that's super important. So you look at teams who don't, like it really hurts. What happens if Jalen Hurts gets hurt? Marcus Mariota is not very good.
Nope.
Like let's be honest.
Yep.
So that's the thing is you need guys like that. I bet they're wishing they had Gardner Minshew because I'll say this: if Philly had Gardner Minshew right now, Jalen Hurts might not be playing.
Yeah.
They might be resting him, right? And that's the thing is they probably don't think they can win many games with Marcus Mariota.
Yeah. Who, by the way, threw 4 touchdowns in his debut with the Tennessee Titans in a drubbing.
He did. Isn't that crazy? So that came up when I was watching the game. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
He did have a pretty good debut, didn't he?
Yeah, 4 touchdowns. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that just should tell you, don't get too excited yet. Doesn't mean that Will didn't do great. He just did great what was given him, and we have to understand that defenses do give things. Now, when you talk about Bagent, I'll just plug this because Lauren Cox over at Locked On Bears, he had me on to talk about Tyson Bagent earlier this week, and it was supposed to come out, I think, yesterday, but he decided to put it out on Friday because of the Montez Sweat trade that was going down as we were talking. But if you want to hear my take on kind of quarterback evaluation for even Division II or Division I, I talk more in detail about that. But suffice to say, I agreed with you that Bagent I saw him as that worst case scenario. If he is going to be a journeyman starter, first tier backup, kind of, at best a Ryan Fitzpatrick type, maybe can be a little more than that if we start to see that his processing of the game grows by leaps and bounds. If that happens, then I think he has a chance to be a notable starter in the league. But I'm more with you in the sense that, look, first, he's got to kind of learn how to deal with the pocket a little bit differently. Like there are some plays that he's got to learn how to climb certain plays and not flush automatically. Right. And so that's the first thing that would be on his list for me. And yeah, we're not. Come on, please don't tell us. If you're the whole idea of Justin Fields being replaced by Tyson Bagent is preposterous at this stage of the game.
Not happening.
Yeah, not happening at all. If it does, I'm not an Atlanta Falcons fan, but I might become one if Justin Fields winds up there with Arthur Smith's offense. So
now it's the Heineke show. So
yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think it's going to probably go good enough that they'll go, yep, we're done with Desmond Ridder. Not that we're going to keep Heineke, but Yeah.
it's just a really, yeah, it's just, it's a really interesting. I just, really, here goes this, man. That offense is a run through Bijan Robinson. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't know why they haven't made that transition yet. You know, you look, just watch what Jahmyr Gibbs did to the Raiders on Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Like, just give the kid, 25 touches. Like, see what he can do. You're gonna get 25 touches for 135 yards and probably 2 touchdowns. That's what he's gonna do.
Is this old school thinking that he's just afraid that we don't really have a quarterback? So why am I going to waste it on waste Robinson's touches? This year.
I just don't. I don't know. I just don't understand why. Like, and the thing is too, like, it's not like they're generating a ton of offense, right? Like, this is a team that's struggling to create yards, and it's, hey, the guy you're giving them bulk of touches to is averaging literally less than 3.2 yards a carry.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a big yards per carry guy, but like, I mean,
Tyler Algier is what he is. He I mean, I saw him as a special teams
100%.
guy who can give you good backup carries and help you win games when you need him to start on a good offense.
Sure.
But he's not a star running back without
no, he's not a starter on a good offense, right?
No.
I think, but it's like, and like Arthur Smith's like playing Cordell Patterson. I'm like,
yeah,
oh my god, like why did you draft this kid in the top 10?
Yeah.
Like, why did you draft this kid if you're like, he can help you win games? Like, he is a rhythm-based runner. You do not give guys like that less than 18 touches a game. Like, it's just malpractice. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I don't understand. But we've talked about Gibbs, we've talked about Robinson. Let's talk about the direction of running backs in this league, because those are two of the guys that you brought up. You also brought Devon Achane, and Jaleel McLaughlin. These are all guys who can catch, who are explosive. They're great in space, and I think they all can run between the tackles.
Yeah.
Are they, in terms of skill set? The question then is for the old schoolers, and someone like myself who still loves the Josh Jacobs type and the Derrick Henry type, and even Chris Rodriguez, who I was not a huge fan of. I still see shades of my old favorite Spencer Ware, and I get excited. So, when you see Gibbs, Achane, and Robinson and McLaughlin, what are you thinking about this in terms of direction of the league?
I think it's interesting because what you're looking at, and you look at kind of the deployment of some of those guys. I think in particular, Gibbs and Achane and Robinson. We haven't seen a ton of Jaleel McLaughlin in this capacity, but used as a traditional receiver, right? Or at least as a decoy in Achane's, perspective, right? He's used more on just design touches like jet toss and all that type of stuff. But with Gibbs, we saw in the Raiders game too, like he'd line up in the slot on third downs, right? They found a way to create an empty formation and keep the kid on the field, right? Like, and keep him as a usable piece, not just split out wide, just, running a smoke, right? But I think that's the direction the league is going at the position, right? I think it's becoming more positionless at running back. Right, you're getting less guys like you alluded to. Your Josh Jacobs, your Derrick Henrys. You're getting less coaches that want to use them like that because the pace of play is speeding up. Right, it's you play the Miami Dolphins, you play the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a race to 30.
Yeah, it's
right?
too much pressure to keep up.
Exactly, right. It's a race, and that's the thing is in a race you want race cars. And I think that's the interesting part about it is you want guys that can play in the slot, that can give you some value as a receiver, right? That can be a one-play touchdown, right? And that's what I think the direction of the league is kind of becoming. And it's interesting because I think it hurts the value of running backs in the near term because it's going to kind of be like a calibration shift. I think similar to how wide receiver has changed a lot in the past decade, right? Where really your primary receiver was your big-bodied X who just sat outside in the boundary and he stayed there the whole game, right? But then Antonio Brown came along, and that's when it started to really shift, right? You got the smaller, the smaller guy, you can move around. Okay, cool. you have Devontae Smith, and you have some of these other guys who are slighter bills, Jordan Addison now,
Yeah.
and move these guys around and get them the ball, right? And that's what receivers became. Is receiver is now your best receiver is your movement Z, really. Like that's the guy you're moving him around to give him touches. You're not putting him on the perimeter. Like DeAndre Hopkins is the last of the Mohicans there, right?
Right.
That's kind of that's him, right? He's staying there, he's staying outside, he's getting touches there. But really now it's for running back, it's you want guys who it's not, hey, this guy can't pass protect. He needs to come out the field. It's all right, cool, we're 3rd and 4. All right, let's go empty, put Gibbs in the slot. Great. And that gives the defense a different headache, right?
Yeah.
Because if you do send pressure, you got a hot done. And that with a good quarterback play, especially with like a guy like Jared Goff, right? If you go empty and there's pressure, he's, it's first down.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is you're getting that from running backs today. And as you and I go about evaluating this next running back class, doesn't have many of those guys.
I'm going to give you a name to watch if you haven't yet, because Chad Ryder gave me a name to watch, and
please do.
Blake Watson out of Memphis.
Yes, he's good.
Yeah,
he's good. Yes, he is.
Yeah, right.
He's good,
and he's got
Memphis produces backs, man. They do.
Out of Old Dominion Memphis by way Old Dominion, and he's got a little. He's got a little. I would put it this way: like if Austin Eckler is the aspirational play for that dude. It's the aspiration. It's a far off aspiration.
I like that though.
But it's kind of there. Giovanni Bernard maybe a little closer in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. He stuck around, man.
Yeah, and Gio's a little bit before his time. And to speak of like running backs and how this is going, I brought this up to Adam Harstead on our Film and Theory shows that we do every Thursday last week. And I said, you know who I think was before their time, about 10 years before their time as a running back, was LaMichael James.
Absolutely.
I think if LaMichael James played in this league, because that's who I compared Devin Achane to, was a faster Michael.
100%.
Yeah. Can you imagine those two in the league right now? Or Dexter McCluster, even.
Yeah,
but definitely
Brandon Banks.
Yeah,
I mean, you're absolutely right.
But LaMichael James wound up on a pound the rock between the tackles, heavy set 49ers offense. If he were, that's where he stayed most of his time after being drafted by the Dolphins, who were also pounding the rock that way. So imagine if he's in Miami right now, or even like in San Francisco now, as opposed to back then, or a team like there's a number of teams that I think kind of fit the bill with that. That's for the Eagles, that he would have been a better running back than I think his career turned out to be. But
I agree.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of a fascinating thing when you look at these backs. I'm saddened to think that this is where it's going a little bit, because I do like the fast guys who can make those big plays, but I'm also kind of hoping that there's a couple of guys that just say, look,
that kind of transcend it. Yeah.
Or just go, I'm going to channel my inner Marty Schottenheimer as a coach and say, forget what everybody wants. I'm going to give you what wins. And just say, everyone's doing this. Okay, we're going to build a team that does the opposite. And we're going to be patient. We're going to walk down the hill and get them all, as opposed to run down the hill and try and get one. And I think that there's still room for that, but it's going to take a special situation. I think to an extent, that's kind of what Dan Campbell's doing, right now. So
absolutely, every bit that team is predicated off of hard-nosed football, play action, and you walk your way down the field.
Yeah.
But you're getting there. You're getting to the green zone. It's going to take you a while to get there.
Yeah. But then when you get the ball again, nobody wants to tackle your football player.
No. And that's the tough part too, is like we saw, like Gibbs, like in the third and fourth quarter, like dude, the Raiders were gassed.
Yes.
Like they have to chase this kid around. Oh my God. Imagine getting bludgeoned by Dave Montgomery for 2 quarters, first 2 quarters. Mid third quarter comes putting Gibbs in.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
but it's good football, man. It's fun to watch.
Then you're
They're playing
gassed,
well.
and then you're gassed, and with 2 minutes left, 3-4 minutes left in the game, you put Montgomery back
Yeah,
in.
yeah. And then you get bludgeoned again.
Yeah, and then you're
Brutal.
like,
Man.
and then you have the fantasy fans are going like, well, Montgomery had a 60-yard touchdown run, and
Yeah.
and you're like, well, there's
Yeah,
a
I
reason
opened the
for
lane
that.
my grandmother could crawl through. My God.
Yeah, so I mean, look, that's awesome. And speaking of like, grandparents, we have a player who has a nickname that a lot of people would call their grandfather by the name of Pops Douglas. And so let's talk about Demario Douglas. It's funny you brought him up as a guy we want to talk about, because 2 weeks ago I profiled him in my top 10 column at footballguys.com, saying this is a guy he's starting to shine.
100%.
Yeah. So
yeah,
what are you seeing?
He's okay. Here goes this: if the Patriots want to do anything, he has to be the number one target in that offense. Like now,
wow.
Kendrick Bourne's out for the year. Juju Smith-Schuster is not Juju Smith-Schuster anymore. They don't have anybody else.
No.
And this is the thing: is he has been the most dynamic playmaker in that offense since week 1.
Yeah.
And you can see that. Why the Bills haven't put him on the field? Why haven't they put him on? I have no idea. But he has to play in the slot. Giving him a two-way go is giving Mac Jones a safety blanket.
Yeah.
Right? The tight ends are okay. I think Henry and Gesicki are fine. Gesicki doesn't do much for this offense, in my opinion. But really, he just gives them, he gives them a threat. And I think Kayshon Boutte is someone who has to start playing too.
Yes.
Right? You just got to see what you have in these guys. Devontae Parker's not doing anything. Juju Smith-Schuster is not doing anything. They never will anymore.
Yeah.
Those guys they're past their time. Let's give the young guys a shot, right? Kayshon Boutte was going to be a legitimate top 12 pick in the NFL draft before the injury and before the off the field stuff. That's where he was ascending. You could even make a case that he was going to be a top 8 pick. He was that good. Let's find out.
Yeah.
Let's find out if he is.
I wrote about him today, and as a guy to hold, because for me, I think what happened is the narratives. The narratives were like, and this is where logo scouting gets into effect. That there's a reason why he was that high, because he was that good. But he wasn't that good in the way Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase were that good. He's more of a if I were to compare him to players, I'd say he's a mix between Jarvis Landry and Robert Woods. He's somewhere in between that. And if you look at their profiles in terms of like athletic testing, there's a lot of similarities to both those guys, is also in terms of dimension and style of play. I think the problem for him right now was that they played him outside. And he's probably his best position right now is still the slot. So they need him at flanker. And he's got to do that. And Bill O'Brien came out today. They asked him about Boutte and said, is he not active because of is he just not handling coaching well? What's going on? And O'Brien said, no, he's doing great in practice. Like, we're very happy with his practice habits and how he's grasping everything. We just feel like he needs a little bit more time to get a handle on what we want him to do. And but I fully believe that he can be a good player in this league, which to me sounded like language of we need to use him out other than the slot, because we found our slot receiver in Demario Douglas.
Yeah.
And that means that Boutte is going to have to play outside, and that means those four targets in week 1 where he didn't get a single catch, and 2 of them he caught, but he couldn't keep his feet in bounds, including a potential game extender in the red zone. But now I'll add this, Julian Edelman, when he got started as a 7th round pick, they started him right away as a receiver, though he was a quarterback, and he barely had any time in his first year. Danny Woodhead out of Shadron State, the running back wide receiver combo, who literally had top 24 production at both positions. Yeah. In the NFL in his 9-year career, he had 4 fantasy starter years, 2 each at each position. So he was they also rarely used him
Right.
early on. And if you look at Ramondre Stevenson, same thing. He had like 2 touches in his first game after a good preseason, like Butte, who had a good preseason. And then 4 weeks went by before he got some more looks, and it was the end of the year. So I think Butte is going to get his chance, but he's not. He's going to have to. I think they know he's going to have to be really conceptually great and really get his
Absolutely.
route game to a razor's edge to be a good flanker in this league, and not like an every down flanker. Like right now, I think he could have passed as a flanker slot who they moved around, like that movable Z you'd mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I think too, having a guy like Mac Jones, like you got to win quick, and you got to win the short to intermediate areas of the field, right? I mean, that's not who he was, right? He won a lot from being rotated to the slot, and I actually compared him to at his very best, like a Juju Smith-Schuster,
Yeah.
right? Because he's in the same room. It's funny, but pre-draft, I'm like watching this kid for a couple years, like he wins like Juju, right? We saw how good Juju was with Antonio Brown, like how good he was getting two-way goes, and Juju was super athletic.
Yeah.
Like he used to be like if you gave him a crease, he's
He
gone
had
after
that.
the catch.
He had that kind of. I don't know how to phrase this, but you'll know as someone who does what you do. I'm putting pressure on you by saying that, but like,
Okay.
but you know how when Adrian Peterson moved, he looked like one of those Stratomatic toys. Like when he runs, like it's like his whole body almost vibrates. Juju had that at USC, like, and early in Pittsburgh, like when he ran, like he was decisive, but the energy was so off the charts.
He was so urgent
Yes.
after the catch. It was insane.
Yeah.
It was such a great marriage between him and Brown and Roethlisberger. Great.
Yeah.
But he just doesn't have it anymore, and that's fine. I mean, they could
Just
have
banged up over time, right?
Yeah, it happens. But a few knees, and there you go. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting offense with the Patriots right now. I mean, you have to, man. I mean, you just got to, hey, Pop, just all right, we're just giving you 12 targets a game, man.
Yeah.
See what you got.
Yeah,
Because you gotta.
Yeah.
There's no.
He
there's
extends
no
well
option.
for the ball. He
does
wins
everything
in
you wanna do.
traffic. He wins
Yeah.
after the catch. He's got the interior game really well in between the numbers. Yeah, it's all there. Yeah, it's all there.
100%. And if you're in Dynasty and someone picked him up off waivers and there's like this guy's in Purdue, just go get him right now, right now, because Kendrick Bourne tore his ACL, he's out for the year. Devontae Parker's dealing with, I think, another concussion potentially, question mark. And Juju Smith-Schuster, he's not going to be targeted very often.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those things where it's, they're going to target anyone. It's got to be the guy who's actually making some plays.
Without a doubt, And so, I mean, yeah, it's Pop Douglas time. And yeah, it's, Pharaoh Brown's over Gesicki at this point. I mean, really, if you look at it.
He is. You're not kidding.
So it is. There's not much left there. Butte is going to be like the guy that they're just going to say, well, we're going to have to use you, ready or not.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. So yeah, well, I'm glad that you guys have choices, and I'm glad that you've made the choice to listen to Brandon and I on an every other week basis here at Going Deep. You can certainly find us at where you can find the RSP cast, Matt Waldman's RSP cast, whether that's on iTunes or Spotify or Google or any place where you go get your podcasts. It's there, and put it up on YouTube as well. I usually wait a little bit longer to do that just because it takes a while to download the video, and I like to show the video occasionally because at least one of us has a handsome face and isn't the guy talking right now. So, but that's okay. I've got a face for radio, and I'm glad that you guys tune in. And you can find Brandon's great work at Angelo_fantasy on Twitter. You can find me at Matt Waldman on Twitter. And thanks again, you guys. Have a great couple of weeks.